Hello, my name is Jeremy Bryant, 32 years old. I am a chef and co-owner of The Hearth, a restaurant chain where dishes tell stories of passion, flavor, and dreams that never yield. Tonight I face the greatest challenge of my life, not creating a new dish or winning over a tough food critic. No, this challenge is far more daunting, confronting my family after 7 years of estrangement. They're waiting for me at the first branch of The Hearth, the restaurant I built with blood, sweat, and tears. They're here to celebrate my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, but none of them know I own this place. And here I am, standing in the small room behind the kitchen counter, feeling my heart pound as if it might burst. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from knives or flames, but from those who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I adjust my white shirt, smoothing the collar, my breath trembling. Out there, the hearth's warm golden lights envelop elegantly set tables, the soft clink of cutlery on porcelain plates mingling with the lively chatter and laughter of customers, all blending with the aroma of my red wine braised beef, a dish I spent months perfecting. But inside me, there's no warmth, only a storm of emotions swirling, as if I'm about to step into an arena where my opponents are my family, my past. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who's ever had to stand up and prove their worth under skeptical gazes. If you've ever felt dismissed for daring to live your passion, stay with me. This story is for you. I grew up in Chicago in a home where perfection wasn't an option but a mandate. My father, William Bryant, was a renowned lawyer who could silence a courtroom with a single glance. My mother, Evelyn, was a philanthropist, always appearing in newspapers with a flawless smile, arm in arm with powerful figures. My older brother, Michael, was a carbon copy of our father, sharp, ambitious, and on track to become a partner at a top law firm. My sister, Sophia, was a neurosurgeon, the family's pride, dubbed a genius. And me? I was Jeremy, the odd one, regarded with a mix of disappointment and pity, because I loved to cook. To my family, that wasn't a career, it was a lowly hobby, women's work, as my father once put it. I still vividly remember the day it all began, the day I knew I belonged in the kitchen. I was 8, perched on a high stool in our spacious family kitchen, watching Rosa, our cook, chop vegetables with lightning speed. She was a petite Mexican woman with a warm smile and hands that could turn any ingredient into magic. Jeremito, she called me. Good food doesn't just feed the stomach, it feeds the soul. Want to try? I nodded, eyes sparkling, and she handed me a small knife, teaching me how to slice onions without crying. That night I made my first omelet, sprinkled with a touch of thyme that Rosa called the secret to flavor. When I presented the plate to her, she took a bite and smiled. "You've got talent, Jeremito. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But my father did. One evening when I was 14, he caught me sneaking into the kitchen at midnight to make beef ragu. I'd spent a week studying the recipe, blending herbs, tasting every spoonful of sauce to ensure it was perfect. I wanted to surprise my parents at breakfast, but when my father walked in and saw me by the stove in Rosa's apron, he was furious. "Jeremy, what are you doing? This is servant's work, not for a Bryant." His voice was icy, cutting through the air like a blade. "You need to focus on your studies, on a future worthy of this family. I don't want to see you doing this lowly stuff again." I stood there, still clutching the wooden spoon, feeling like my world had collapsed. I didn't dare speak, just quietly cleaned up and retreated to my room, but deep inside, the flame of my passion still burned. From then on, I learned to hide my love for cooking. I hosted secret dinners for friends in the garage, where I kept a small gas stove I'd bought with my savings. I created dishes, from burgers with homemade chimichurri sauce to caramel flan I learned from Rosa. My friends called me the magic chef, and every compliment made me feel alive. But at home, I played the obedient Jeremy, destined for Northwestern University to study business as my father wanted. The pressure didn't just come from my father. My mother, though kinder, subtly reminded me to do something great to avoid tarnishing the Bryant name. Michael, my brother, mocked me, calling me an amateur chef with a smug smirk. Only Sophia, my sister, sometimes sneaked bites of my dishes and praised them, but even she didn't dare support me openly. I felt like an outsider in my own home, always hiding my true self to please those I loved. Things escalated after high school. I faced the biggest crossroads of my life: follow my family's expectations or chase my dream. I'd applied to the prestigious Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School, but when my father found out, he called it a disgrace. "You want to be a dishwasher in a restaurant?" he roared in the living room, his voice thundering. "Bryants don't raise failures, Jeremy." I tried to explain that cooking was art, passion, my way of finding meaning in life. But he wouldn't listen. He issued an ultimatum: study business, or I was no longer his son. I chose the safe path. I enrolled at Northwestern studying business, but I never gave up. I secretly took weekend cooking classes and worked part-time as a prep cook at a local restaurant. I washed dishes, chopped onions, stood for hours by scorching stoves just to learn. Every burn on my hands, every exhausting shift brought me closer to my dream. But I knew that to live authentically, I'd have to pay a steep price. The turning point came during my senior year at a Chicago food event. I met Chef Antonio Moretti, a legend in the culinary world with 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. Trembling, I presented him with a dish I'd created: pan-seared salmon with passion fruit sauce and hazelnuts. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and looked at me in a way I'll never forget. "You have talent," he said. "You don't belong in a classroom. You belong in a kitchen." He offered me a job at his New York restaurant, an opportunity I knew would change my life. But seizing it meant giving up everything. I turned down the finance internship my father had arranged, packed my bags, and bought a one-way ticket to New York. The night before I left, I stood outside my parents' bedroom wanting to say goodbye. But when I overheard my father on the phone with a friend saying, "Jeremy will come to his senses. He doesn't have the guts to be a chef," I turned away without knocking. I left Chicago without looking back, carrying a broken heart and a burning resolve. When the plane touched down at JFK, I felt the biting cold of March piercing through my thin jacket. New York didn't greet me with the twinkling lights of movies, but with blaring car horns and a rushing crowd, as if to remind me this was no place for the weak. In my suitcase, I had a few clothes, a notebook filled with recipes, and $700, my entire savings. In my heart, I carried my father's words, a deep cut. He doesn't have the guts. I clenched my fists, telling myself, "You'll prove him wrong, Jeremy." My first apartment in Brooklyn wasn't a place to live. It was a place to survive. It was on the 5th floor of a crumbling building, no elevator, reeking of mildew, with the screech of nearby subway tracks. The room, barely 15 square meters, held a single bed, a mini gas stove, and a small wooden table by a cracked window. Rent ate up most of my money, but I didn't dare complain. I'd chosen this path, and this was the price of freedom. On my first day at La Stella, Chef Antonio Moretti's restaurant, I walked in with my heart pounding. The restaurant in upscale Manhattan glowed with warm golden lights, white silk tablecloths, and a menu written in elegant calligraphy. I thought I'd start cooking, but Antonio, with a half-stern, half-teasing smile, handed me an apron and pointed to a towering stack of dishes. "You want to be a chef? Start here," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "A person who can't wash dishes clean will never make good food." I washed dishes for 3 months, 16 hours a day, my hands wrinkled from soapy water, my back aching from standing. The other chefs, seasoned men and women with burn scars on their hands, called me rookie and didn't hesitate to yell when I was slow. "Hurry up, rookie. Guests don't wait," they shouted amid sizzling pans and the smell of hot oil. Some nights I dragged myself back to my apartment, collapsing onto the bed, too exhausted to cook, nibbling a protein bar and staring at the ceiling. "Are you on the right path, Jeremy?" I asked myself. My father's voice echoed in my head, a relentless tune. But one afternoon, Antonio called me into the kitchen. "You survived 3 months," he said, his eyes narrowing as if weighing me. "Today you'll cook a dish. Anything you want. Don't disappoint me. My heart raced so fast I feared it would burst. This was the chance I'd waited for. I chose a wild mushroom risotto with truffle cream and fresh thyme, a dish I'd made for Rosa as a kid. My hands shook as I stirred the rice, but my mind was laser-focused, the world shrinking to the pan before me. When Antonio tasted it, he said nothing, just nodded and told me to keep working. That nod to me was worth more than any medal. From that day, I was allowed in the kitchen, even if just to assist, chopping vegetables, making sauces, prepping ingredients. Each day I learned a bit more, from how to hold a knife precisely to balancing sweet and sour in a dish. To chase my dream, I enrolled at the Culinary Institute of America, CIA. I was lucky to get a small scholarship, but still took out student loans to cover tuition and living costs. My life became a grueling cycle. Mornings studying culinary theory, afternoons practicing at school, evenings to midnight working at La Stella. Some days I slept 3 hours dozing on the subway from Brooklyn to Manhattan, my recipe notebook clutched tightly. I lost weight, my eyes grew dark circles, but I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was living, truly living, because every dish I made brought me closer to who I wanted to be. New York was pricier than I'd imagined. Some months I lived on instant noodles and black coffee, spending every penny on ingredients for new dishes. I remember standing at a market meat counter holding a prime cut of beef I wanted for a beef Wellington. But I put it back. My wallet had only $10. I returned to my apartment, made spaghetti with homemade tomato sauce, and told myself, "One day you'll make that beef, Jeremy, just be patient." Loneliness was another challenge. In Chicago, I had friends, secret garage dinners. In New York, I had only myself. I didn't dare call home, unwilling to hear my father say I was wasting my life. Michael and Sophia texted occasionally, but they were busy with their lives, and I didn't want to bother them. Some nights I sat by my apartment window watching the city lights, feeling like a speck of sand. But then I'd open my notebook, jotting down new ideas. Lentil soup with coconut milk, chocolate mousse with sea salt. Those recipes were my friends, my reason to keep going. After a year, I started making my mark at La Stella. Antonio tasked me with creating appetizers for a major event with food critics. I spent 2 weeks perfecting a shrimp ceviche with mango and jalapeno, tweaking it for perfect balance. The night of the event, the kitchen was a battlefield. Shouts, smoke, crushing pressure. I stood at my station, hands trembling but mind-focused, plating each dish like it was my last. When Antonio carried out the ceviche, I heard applause from the dining room. A notoriously harsh critic wrote in the New York Times that the ceviche was a symphony of flavors crafted by a promising young talent. I clipped that review, pasted it in my notebook, and for the first time in months I cried, not from sadness, but because I knew I was on the right path. But the path was never easy. One hectic night, I botched a pan-seared cod. It burned because I lost focus. Antonio yelled at me in front of the team, "Jeremy, if you're not serious, get out. I don't need a dreamer in my kitchen." My face burned, the sting of my father's failure label resurfacing. But instead of walking away, I apologized, returned to the stove, and remade the dish. Antonio said nothing, but after the shift, he patted my shoulder. "You've got guts," he said. "Don't lose that." I learned from those around me. Maria, a Puerto Rican prep cook, always brought leftovers home for her kids, teaching me about sacrifice. Carlos, a pastry chef, showed me how to make perfect tiramisu, reminding me, food isn't just food, Jeremy. It's love. They weren't just colleagues. They were my new family, believing in me when I doubted myself. After 3 years, I graduated from CIA with honors, but I knew I was only beginning. Antonio promoted me to sous chef, a big step with bigger pressure. I started creating menu dishes, experimenting with bold ideas like roasted pork with plum ginger sauce or coconut ice cream with black pepper. Each dish was a small battle between me and my limits. Some nights I stayed up testing a new recipe, only to fail and start over. But each failure reminded me of Rosa's words. Good food feeds the soul. I wasn't just cooking to survive, I was cooking to feed my dream. One evening, after a long shift, Antonio called me into his office. "You've done well, Jeremy," he said, handing me a glass of wine. "But you need a bigger goal. You're not meant to work for someone forever. Think about building something of your own." His words were a spark, igniting an idea I'd never dared consider. My own restaurant. The thought thrilled me, but also filled me with trembling fear. The years in New York were a journey of blood, sweat, and tears. I lost many things: comfort, my connection with family, full nights of sleep. But I found myself. Every burn on my hand, every dish I perfected was a reminder that I wasn't the failure my father once thought. I was Jeremy Bryant, building my dream, one dish at a time. After 4 years in New York, I was no longer the trembling rookie in La Stella's kitchen. I had become a sous chef, trusted by Antonio Moretti to create new dishes. But deep inside, the dream of my own restaurant still burned. The idea of the hearth, a place where people gather, sharing joy through food, was more than a name. It was a promise of a space where diners didn't just eat, but felt healed. I wanted every plate to tell a story, just as Rosa taught me that good food nourishes the soul. The opportunity came one evening after a shift at La Stella when I met Clara Zetkin, an investor with sharp eyes and a passion for bold ideas. I'd heard of her through culinary circles, a formidable woman who turned small restaurants into renowned destinations. Antonio introduced me to her at a charity event where I prepared dishes for guests. After tasting my pan-seared salmon with passion fruit sauce, Clara approached me, handed me her card, and said, "You have vision, Jeremy. If you want to do something bigger, call me." After weeks of deliberation, I called and arranged a meeting. In a small Brooklyn cafe, I pitched The Hearth, a restaurant blending global flavors with local ingredients, where diners would feel the warmth of a family meal. Clara listened, took notes, and asked pointed questions about finances, operations, and strategy. At the end, she made an offer. She'd invest 80% of the capital to open The Hearth's first location in New York, on the condition that she'd be involved in management, and that the menu would reflect my vision. I agreed, knowing that working with someone like Clara wouldn't be easy. She wasn't just investing money, she was investing faith in me. Opening The Hearth was a massive gamble. I spent months perfecting the menu, testing dishes like roasted beet soup with seared shrimp, pork with plum ginger sauce, and chocolate mousse with sea salt. I wanted each dish to tell a story, from memories of sneaking late-night cooking sessions with Rosa to sleepless nights in my cramped Brooklyn apartment. But building a restaurant wasn't just about cooking. I had to learn to manage a team, negotiate with suppliers, and face financial pressures. Clara was a strict mentor, always pushing me beyond my limits. "If you want to succeed, Jeremy, you have to be ready to fail," she said. "But don't fail because of laziness." The opening night of The Hearth in the fall of 2021 was a whirlwind of emotions. The restaurant in Brooklyn's Williamsburg had a cozy ambiance with soft golden lights and artwork on the walls evoking family kitchens. That night, diners lined up outside, many of them Clara's contacts or readers of my New York Times ceviche review. I stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, directing the team like a commander on a battlefield. Every plate leaving the kitchen had to be perfect, not just for the diners, but for me. When an elderly couple stood to applaud after tasting my red wine braised beef, saying it reminded them of their mother's dinners, I knew I'd created something special. The Hearth quickly became a favorite. Magazines like Bon Appetit and Food and Wine praised my dishes for their creativity and emotion. Within a year, The Hearth had a months-long waitlist. Clara and I began planning expansion with a second location in Chicago, followed by Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Miami. Each new branch was a fresh challenge, hiring teams, tweaking menus for local tastes, and staying true to the original vision. I worked 18-hour days, traveling between cities, checking every detail, from plate presentation to tablecloth quality. But success wasn't just the spotlight. Some nights I collapsed on the office sofa, exhausted, wondering if I'd strayed too far from my original dream. Once at the Chicago branch, a staff member dropped a tray of plates just before peak hours. I wanted to yell, but I remembered Antonio's words. "You've got guts. Don't lose that." I helped clean up, remade the dishes, and that night we served 200 diners without a single complaint. Clara patted my shoulder after the shift. "You're not just a chef, Jeremy. You're a leader." Money started flowing in, but so did pressure. Each new branch tested my abilities, not just in cooking, but in keeping teams united and customers happy. Once a critic at the Los Angeles branch called my risotto lacking depth. I stayed up all night reworking the recipe, adding a touch of truffle cream. When the critic returned, he called it a masterpiece. Moments like that reminded me that every failure was a chance to learn. The Hearth wasn't just a restaurant chain, it was my legacy. I began receiving invitations to appear on cooking shows, but declined most, unwilling to let fame overshadow my original dream. I hired young chefs from underserved communities, teaching them as Rosa had taught me, watching them grow in the kitchen. One, a 19-year-old named Luz, made tamales that brought tears to my eyes, reminding me of my early New York days. "You're telling your own story," I told her, and she smiled, her eyes shining. But even as the Hearth grew, I couldn't fill the void in my heart. My family, my father, mother, Michael, and Sophia, remained an unhealed wound. I hadn't contacted them, avoiding their mockery or disappointed looks. Then one day, Sophia texted me, "Jeremy, Mom wants to host their 35th wedding anniversary party at the Hearth in New York. I hear it's packed with delicious, innovative food. Mom wants us to reunite, so you have to be there." My hands trembled as I read it. They didn't know the Hearth was mine. They still thought I was a small-time chef working at some random restaurant. I stood in my office, gazing at the lights of the New York branch, wondering, was I ready to face them? Would they see me as Jeremy Bryant, who built a culinary empire, or still just the family's odd one? A storm of emotions churned inside me. Excitement that my family would taste my food, anxiety about facing their familiar yet distant gazes, and a bitter sting that they still saw me as a failure. That day, I personally crafted the menu for my family. An appetizer of shrimp ceviche with mango and jalapeno, a main course of red wine braised beef with truffle mashed potatoes, and for dessert, chocolate mousse with sea salt. Each dish was a piece of me, a story of my journey from secret garage cooking sessions to sleepless nights in New York. But would my family feel that? Or would they only taste delicious food unaware of who created it? The small bell at the entrance chimed, signaling their arrival. I took a deep breath, inhaling the aroma of pumpkin soup simmering gently on the stove. This was my home turf, my arena. As I pushed through the door, I wasn't just carrying my successes. I carried 7 years of struggle, 7 years of pain, and 7 years of loneliness in pursuit of my passion. The Hearth's dining room glowed with golden light, tables elegantly set with white silk linens and fresh flowers. My family sat at the central table, which I deliberately positioned for the best view of the open kitchen. My father, William Bryant, still exuded the commanding presence of a renowned lawyer, his hair flecked with gray, but his piercing eyes unchanged. My mother, Evelyn, looked elegant in an emerald dress, her polite smile ever present. Michael, my brother in a black suit, was chatting with a young woman beside him, likely his girlfriend, whom Sophia had mentioned in her texts. Sophia, my sister, sat across, scanning the menu with curiosity. They looked like a perfect portrait of Chicago's elite, but I knew the cracks beneath that facade were irreparable. I stood in the corner watching from afar, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to rush over, hug them, and tell them everything I'd achieved. But another part, the part wounded by my father's harsh words, Michael's smirks, and my mother's silence, held me back. I signaled the waitstaff to begin and retreated to the kitchen, my safest haven. The ceviche was served first. Through the kitchen's glass window, I saw my mother lift her fork, take a bite, and smile at Sophia. "This is truly special," I heard her say, her voice filled with surprise. The flavors are fresh, yet somehow warm. Michael nodded, raising an eyebrow at his girlfriend, who beamed. My father, always critical of food, took a bite, set his fork down, and said nothing. I told myself, he doesn't hate it. That's a small victory. The table's atmosphere grew lively. I heard laughter, the clink of wine glasses, and Sophia recounting a recent surgery. But then, amid the chatter, Michael's voice rang out clearly. I wonder what Jeremy's up to in New York. Probably still chopping onions in some small restaurant, right? He laughed as if it were a harmless joke. His girlfriend covered her mouth, giggling, while my mother shook her head slightly, trying to change the subject. My father, in his low voice, added, he chose that path. Don't expect much. My heart felt like it was being crushed. Behind the glass, I gripped the kitchen counter, transported back to the night my father called me a failure. 7 years I'd built the hearth, earned praise in culinary magazines, served thousands of diners, yet to them, I was still Jeremy, the odd one, the dropout chasing a lowly dream. I wanted to storm out, to shout that this was my restaurant, that every dish they praised was mine. But I held back, returned to the stove, and focused on the main course. Let the food speak for you, Jeremy, I told myself. The braised beef was served, its aroma of red wine and herbs filling the room. I saw Sophia close her eyes at the first bite, then turn to my mother. Mom, this dish, it's like someone poured their heart into it. My mother nodded, and Michael, despite his arrogance, cleaned his plate. My father this time whispered to my mother, This restaurant is truly impressive. Who owns it? I heard the question, and a bitter smile crossed my lips. He didn't know that the son he'd disowned was the owner. When the dessert, chocolate mousse with sea salt, was served, the table buzzed with excitement. Michael's girlfriend, whom I later learned was named Lily, exclaimed, This is the best dessert I've ever had. Sophia agreed, and my mother, who rarely praised food, said, We must thank the chef. They're truly talented. From the kitchen, I heard their words, feeling both pride and pain. They praised me, unaware it was me. They admired my work, but still scorned who I was. Then came the fateful moment. As the bill was brought out, Lily casually asked the server, a young woman named Emma, about the restaurant's owner. Emma, unaware I wanted to keep it a secret, smiled brightly and said, Oh, that's Mr. Bryant, Jeremy Bryant. He's the co-owner and created every dish on the menu. She pointed toward me, standing near the kitchen door. The table fell silent. I felt their eyes, like arrows piercing the air, aimed straight at me. My father frowned as if he couldn't believe his ears. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide. Michael, for the first time, lost his confident air, his mouth agape. Sophia was the only one who smiled, a mix of surprise and pride. I walked to the table, striving to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. Hello, everyone, I said. Welcome to the hearth. Thank you for coming. No one spoke for a few seconds, as if time had frozen. Then my mother stood, rushed to me, and hugged me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jeremy, this is your restaurant? Her voice trembled with emotion. I nodded, fighting back tears. Yes, Mom. This is my restaurant. Michael broke the silence, his voice a mix of shock and disbelief. You're kidding. The hearth is yours? The famous chain everyone's talking about? He stared, as if trying to piece it together. Lily clapped, beaming. That's amazing, Jeremy. Tonight's food. I'm speechless. Sophia stood, hugging me tightly. You've made me so proud, Jeremy. I didn't know. I'm sorry for not checking in more. But my father remained seated, silent. His eyes studied me as if reassessing the man before him. I felt the weight of that gaze, like the night he called me a disgrace. I turned to him, my voice calm but firm. Dad, I did it. Not to prove anything to you, but because this is who I am. But I want you to know I'm not a failure. The air grew tense. My mother squeezed my hand as if to soothe me, but I continued. Tonight, you all praised the food, the restaurant. But minutes ago, you thought I was just some low-level chef chopping onions somewhere. I don't need your approval to know who I am, but I want you to see how far I've come, even when no one believed in me." Michael looked down, visibly ashamed. Sophia quietly wiped a tear. My father finally stood. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Jeremy, you've done something I never expected. I was wrong." Those words, though not a direct apology, were something I never thought I'd hear from him. But they didn't bring relief. Instead, I felt a deep sadness. I'd fought so long, not for an apology, but to find myself. The party resumed in a strange atmosphere, both warm and awkward. My mother kept holding my hand, asking about my journey as if trying to make up for 7 years of distance. Sophia shared stories about her patients, but kept glancing at me with proud eyes. Michael, still carrying his air of arrogance, patted my shoulder. "You did great, Jeremy, really." Lily excitedly asked about the chocolate mousse recipe, making me laugh for the first time that evening. I sat there, surrounded by familiar yet distant faces, feeling like I was walking a tightrope. Part of me wanted to embrace them, to erase 7 years of pain with a single hug. But another part, the one accustomed to New York's solitude, kept me at a safe distance. I smiled, answering my mother's questions about how I created the braised beef, but inside I wondered, have they truly changed, or are they just stunned by my success? As the party neared its end, my mother pulled me to a quiet corner where the hearth's golden light softened. She held my hands, her eyes glistening with tears. "Jeremy, I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have supported you, listened to you. I didn't know what you went through, but I'm so proud of you, truly." I looked at her, the woman who always appeared perfect in newspapers, now more fragile than ever. I wanted to say I didn't blame her, that I understood the pressure of our family's reputation had silenced her. Instead, I hugged her, feeling the warmth I'd missed for 7 years. "Come home, Jeremy," she said, releasing me. "Your father and I want you to come for dinner like old times. Just family." The simple invitation tightened my chest. The Chicago house, where I'd once felt like an outsider, was now opening its doors to me. Was I ready to step inside? I nodded, my voice hoarse. "Yes, Mom. I'll come." Returning to the table, I saw Michael and Lily laughing with Sophia. My father, though still stern, was chatting with a server about the wine used in the beef dish. I noticed he'd drunk more than usual, a rare sign he was trying to relax. When he saw me, he stood, patted my shoulder, his gesture stiff but sincere. "You've done well, Jeremy," he said, his voice low. I'd like to talk, when you're ready." I met his eyes, searching for sincerity, and for the first time I found it. Not a direct apology, but a start. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. In the days following the party, my family reached out more often. Sophia texted daily, asking about work and sharing funny hospital stories. My mother called, her voice brimming with excitement about planning a charity event at the hearth. Even Michael, who rarely texted, sent a brief message. "You okay, Jeremy?" Last night, I was shocked, but I'm happy for you. I read it, smiled, but didn't reply right away. I needed time to process, to believe they truly wanted to mend things. A week later, I flew to Chicago for dinner at home. The old house was just as I remembered, neatly trimmed lawn, gleaming windows, and the scent of oak from the furniture. But this time, I didn't feel like an outsider. My mother had made barbecued ribs, my childhood favorite, though she admitted she'd used a recipe from a food magazine. "I can't compete with you," she laughed, setting the plate before me. My father, at the head of the table, opened a bottle of wine, pouring for everyone. Michael and Sophia chatted lively, and for the first time in years, I felt I belonged. During dinner, Michael stood, lightly tapping his glass. "We have something to share," he said, holding Lily's hand. "We're getting engaged." The table erupted in cheers and applause. My mother hugged Lily, tears streaming. Sophia teased Michael. "Finally, you did something worthwhile." My father, rarely so warm, smiled broadly, raising his glass. "To the happy couple." I looked at Lily, radiant with her warm smile, and Michael, my brother who once mocked me, now happier than ever. I stood hugging them both, feeling part of their joy. As we sat back down, Lily shared their wedding plans. "We want an outdoor reception, but also something elegant," she said, eyes sparkling. "I'm thinking a beautiful restaurant with amazing food." My heart raced. I immediately pictured the Hearth's Chicago branch, my newest pride. A grand space with a glass ceiling, crystal chandeliers, and an outdoor garden perfect for events. I envisioned a wedding there, tables draped in silk, fresh flowers everywhere, and dishes prepared by me. But then, a bigger idea struck. I stood, my voice trembling with excitement. "Michael, Lily, I have a proposal. Have your wedding at the Hearth's Chicago branch. It's made for occasions like this, and I'll cover all the costs as my wedding gift to you." The table fell silent. Michael stared, eyes wide. "Jeremy, you're serious? That's a huge expense." Lily covered her mouth, tears glistening. My mother gripped my father's hand as if disbelieving her ears. I smiled, nodding. "I'm serious, Michael. You're my brother. Lily, you're about to be my sister-in-law. I want you to have a perfect wedding, and I want to do this from the heart." Lily rushed to hug me, sobbing, "Thank you, Jeremy." I don't know what to say. Michael stood, hugging me tightly, his voice hoarse. "Thanks, Jeremy. I don't deserve this after everything." I patted his shoulder, cutting him off. "We're family. That's what matters." In the weeks that followed, I dove into planning Michael and Lily's wedding. I flew between New York and Chicago, working with the Hearth's team to design the venue. We chose ivory tablecloths, white roses, purple orchids, and golden lighting for a cozy feel. The menu was a thrilling challenge. I created a seared shrimp appetizer with passion fruit sauce, beef Wellington with creamy mashed potatoes for the main course, and a multi-tiered wedding cake with vanilla cream and wild strawberry jam for dessert. Each dish was my blessing to them. During the preparations, my family grew closer. My mother frequently visited the Hearth to help pick flowers, always bringing homemade dishes to make up for my efforts. Sophia joined menu tastings, joking she wanted to learn cooking from me. Michael, for the first time, called to ask my opinion on the guest list. My father, though quieter, began asking about my work, how I managed 5 branches. Once he said, "You have an entrepreneur's spirit, Jeremy. I'm proud of you." Those words, though late, moved me deeply. The night before returning to New York, I sat in the Hearth's Chicago kitchen reviewing the wedding menu sketch. I reflected on my journey, from the boy sneaking meals in the garage to the man behind a culinary empire. My family, though they'd hurt me, was now trying to heal, and I was learning to forgive. I opened my recipe notebook, writing a new line. "Wedding cake for Michael and Lily. Love, trust, and new beginnings." I knew the road ahead was long, but this time I wasn't walking alone. My family, imperfect as they were, was part of the hearth in my heart, where old wounds slowly healed and new flames were kindled. Michael and Lily's wedding took place 3 months later at the Hearth's Chicago branch, just as planned. It was a perfect day, exactly as I'd envisioned. The outdoor garden was adorned with white roses and purple orchids, crystal lights twinkling under the night sky. Guests, from Bryant family friends to Michael's business associates, filled the air with laughter and the clink of wine glasses. I stood in the kitchen, directing the team with absolute focus, but this time not to prove anything. I did it out of love, for my family, for food, and for myself. When the beef Wellington was served, applause erupted from the garden. Lily, radiant in her pristine white wedding dress, rushed into the kitchen to hug me, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Jeremy, you're the best brother-in-law." Michael followed, still carrying his usual arrogance, but his eyes were warmer than ever. "You've got me indebted for life, Jeremy," he said, patting my shoulder. I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's call it even, big brother." My mother gripped my hand tightly, whispering, "You're my pride." My father only nodded, but that nod meant more to me than any words. That night, as guests danced under the lights, I stood alone in a corner of the garden watching my family. People who once made me feel inadequate, now laughing and celebrating together. I was no longer the boy sneaking meals in the garage, fearing my father's judgment. I was Jeremy Bryant, who built the hearth, who found his worth through dishes and scars on his hands. But above all, I was part of this family, not because they finally acknowledged me, but because I'd learned to forgive and love them despite the past. After the wedding, I returned to New York, but this time with a newfound peace. My family became a regular part of my life. My mother sent recipes she tried, though none matched her old barbecued ribs. Sophia invited me to cook for her hospital patients, an experience that showed me food could heal in ways I'd never imagined. Michael and Lily, now married, occasionally flew to New York to dine at the hearth, teasing that they were checking quality. My father, still reserved, began sending me articles about the hearth with short notes. "Keep it up, son." These small gestures, though imperfect, were their way of showing they'd changed. But my journey didn't end with the hearth. After the wedding, I launched a training program for young chefs from underserved communities, inspired by my early days in New York. I wanted to give them the chance I'd craved, a chance to shine, to tell their stories through food. One of the first trainees, a 17-year-old named Diego from a rough Brooklyn neighborhood, reminded me of myself. His eyes sparkled with a fierce passion for cooking. When he made fish tacos with mango salsa, I took a bite and smiled. "You've got talent, Diego. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He grinned, radiant, and I knew I was doing the right thing. The training program became a cornerstone of the hearth. We expanded it to all 5 branches, attracting dozens of trainees yearly. Watching them grow, from novices fumbling with knives to confident chefs creating dishes, gave me a deeper sense of success. It wasn't about glowing reviews or months-long wait lists, but about inspiring others to believe their dreams were worth chasing. A year later, I began writing a cookbook, not just a collection of recipes, but the story of my journey. I titled it, "The Hearth Within." In it, I wrote about sneaking meals in the garage, lonely New York nights, and failures and triumphs in the kitchen. Most importantly, I shared my biggest lesson. The truest success isn't others' recognition, but living authentically, despite doubt or fear. Writing the book was its own journey. Some nights I sat in my New York apartment, gazing at the city lights, feeling like I was speaking to the young Jeremy. I wrote about my father calling me a failure, the burns on my hands, and the moment I stood in the hearth's kitchen knowing I'd found my path. I wrote for those struggling to chase their dreams, doubted by family, society, or themselves. I wrote, "Don't let anyone define your worth. Your dream is your inner flame, and only you can keep it burning." When the book was published, it wasn't just a commercial success. It became a reminder for me, and hopefully for readers, that life is a journey of self-discovery. I received letters from readers worldwide, from a girl in Texas dreaming of opening a bakery to a man in London fighting to become a musician. They thanked me, not for recipes, but for giving them courage to believe in themselves. Each letter was a gift, a reminder that I'd done what Rosa taught me, love the world through food and stories. Now, sitting in the hearth's New York kitchen, watching my team prepare for a busy shift, I feel a peace I'd never known. My family is no longer my judges, but my companions, though our healing journey isn't perfect. The hearth isn't just a restaurant chain. It's a symbol of the fire within me, the flame that guided me through my darkest days. If you're still listening to this story, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me as a boy sneaking meals in the garage. Don't fear chasing your dream. There will be doubters, even those you love most. There will be days you feel not good enough, not strong enough. But your dream is your own flame. Keep it burning, even with the smallest spark. Because when you live true to yourself, that's the truest success. No one can take that from you. Stay steadfast on your journey to conquer your passion, and I wish you success soon.